completely forgot to start recording. So I'm just going to quickly repeat some of that stuff for the recording. Welcome to Umpiring Fundamentals, and I'm going to begin by explaining some of the stuff about our Discord and about some really important links on our Discord. So the most important section for umpires is the umpiring section. If you can't see this, let an admin or a moderator know, and they'll help unlock it for you. It is a preference setting that you can set. So if you decide to show all channels, I believe this does come up. Under each of these channels, there's a little pin button. And if you click that, it'll open all the pinned messages. It looks a little different on the phone app, but it's the same idea. And if you scroll down in the pinned messages, you'll see a lot of really great rule sets. And probably most importantly, you'll come across this IKS rule system spreadsheet. And what that has is a list of all of the rule sets that are kind of public in the Kriegsspiel Society. And they're organized by time period. And if you scroll all the way over to the right, there's usually a link to the actual rule set document under URL. So you can see all of the available ones are here. Now, the blank ones sometimes will say they're still in testing or by request only. So if you are still really interested in those, you can reach out to the designer and they'll usually help you out. But there's a lot of really good starting places here. I would say the two most popular systems are probably James's D6 and D8. So these two here are really, really flexible. You can use them for Napoleonics or American Civil War, and they're very straightforward. So they're a really good starting place. I would definitely recommend those. Probably the D8 system is the better of the two statistically, but they're both equally easy to use. The other really popular systems are Ottavosky's, both his World War II tactical level one. So these are kind of platoon level. So very low level World War II systems. And a lot of people love those. They're very flexible. And as well as his Napoleonic system, which is even more popular, I would say. And all of those have really, really great documentation. And that's probably the best thing about those is like, they have pre-written player guides, so it's very plug and play. He's done all the work for you. You pretty much just have to write your scenario, pick a map, throw the pieces down, and you're ready to go. So I do recommend starting with something like that, and then you'll kind of realize what you want in your system, because the reality is everyone eventually wants their own system, just because it's easier to memorize if you wrote it yourself. And you'll eventually probably start with either James's system or Otto's system and work your way towards something that's more akin to what you would envision. So hopefully that is useful for you guys. And if you've seen it before, I'm sure you're very happy to see it again. So with that, I want to also point you to one of Otto's, I would say, maybe his most important contribution to the Kriegsspiel Society, which is preparing and running a Kriegsspiel game checklist and guide. And this is also pinned in the new umpires channel. So if you look under the new umpires channel pins, Otto has this incredible document. And this is what we're going to basically be going through today. We'll go through at least the pre-game elements of this slide by slide, and then we're going to do a bit of a practical portion of the training. So you guys will each get to run like a pretend turn, and at that point I will pause the recording so you guys don't have to worry about being YouTube infamous. So with that, I do want to switch over to a short slide deck that I've prepared. And throughout the slide deck, all the images you see are either mine or open source. So just be aware that all this is free to share. So like I was saying, we're mostly going to be going over Otto's checklist, but we are going to then follow up with a practical exercise. And throughout this whole thing, I'm going to be kind of harping on the 3 principles below. Making sure you put limits on players, make sure you keep it simple, and make sure you take care of yourself as you're an umpire. It's very easy to get sucked down the umpiring rabbit hole and spend 8 hours a day doing nothing but Kriegsspiel, because it is quite fun. So the general way a umpiring experience starts is you get really interested in a topic and you start doing your research and you realize, oh, this would make a good game. And a lot of the time, that's kind of where the process ends. Most people don't follow through and actually do the work to get it to come to life, because it is before the game where all the hard work happens. A lot of people think that umpiring an actual game is challenging, but that's the easy part relative to the research and the prep work. And if you don't put in that prep work, that is where umpiring the actual game itself does become challenging. And I can say that from experience, having been unprepared for a game or two in my time. So generally, the first step is to get all the pieces together that you need to play the game, which for most of us basically means creating a tabletop simulator module. Now, this training is not going to include all the steps on how to do that, but like I said in the outset, a lot of that stuff is pinned in the Discord channels, and it can be very involved. It can be very quick. It's really up to you and what your scenario is about. From there, you want to make sure that you have a really well-written briefing document for each side. And in that document, you want links to the module, links to the map, and lots of detail, miscellaneous information about little things that players will want to know. It'll make it feel more historical. And importantly, if it's a live game, it'll give them something to read while you're doing the nitty-gritty, like assigning them roles and channels and stuff. So they won't be bugging you the whole time and asking questions. The more questions that you answer on paper in a document, the less questions you will have to answer with your overstressed and overworked umpire team. So it is very, very important to spend the time and write a good briefing document. And some really good examples of briefing documents are in this checklist document. I would say that Otto is a great kind of pre-game writer of briefing materials, but there are also a ton of briefing materials that do it differently and are equally good. Felix also writes extremely good material, and obviously James is kind of the master of doing really quick scenarios on a weekly basis, and his preparation is a little bit different. And a lot more of it is verbal, but you always still have what you need to play the game. To me, the most important part of a good briefing document is the historical or fictional context. That means you want the players to understand why the hell they're fighting a battle at this place, in this time, and how it connects to the wider conflict. Now, in an operational game where the players are actually creating the battle themselves, that's easy. They already know. But in a tactical battle, say you're playing the Battle of Chancellorsville, and you have to go into it assuming that the players don't understand the wider context of the campaign. So you have to provide all that detail there. Even if it's very brief, or even if it's just sending them on a link to a wiki page, you got to give them something, because you can't assume that they're going to come into it with the knowledge that they'll need to understand the context. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to tell them what battle you're fighting. And I think that's something that some umpires really want to be sneaky and kind of have a big surprise, a big gotcha moment. I think it's a better approach to have everyone understand the historical context, because a real commander would know why the hell he's there, for the most part. Now, they don't need to know specifically why they're there at that particular battlefield. You can leave some stuff as a surprise, but they should understand the wider world around them. After that, the next most important thing is the initial situation. And this is where you can be a little bit shifty on them. You can provide them mostly correct information, or twisted information that will lead them to think a certain way. But in my opinion, again, this is just my personal preference with both historical context and the initial situation report, I think it's a lot better to play it straight up and tell them what's going on, tell them what time it is, what the weather is, all the stuff they're going to need to know right off the bat. Because the more of that stuff you put into your briefing, the less you're going to have to answer, because they're going to ask all of those questions whether you like it or not. You're either going to have to say, oh, you don't know what the weather is, or something ridiculous like that. I've heard umpires have to try to say stuff like that so that their surprise works. But if your game is hinging on the players not knowing anything, that's not very fun for the players. They have to have enough information to have decision-making capabilities, because that's the whole point of the game. Next, after you have all of your briefing done and all the briefing materials written, what you want to do is get as much stuff set up in Discord as possible, as far beforehand as you can. That means you want to name the channels, you put the turn 1 screenshot in there, put their orders of battle in there, do everything you can ahead of time, even including rolling the players if you need to. Like for the recent Grand Jena Arstadt game, we created a whole server, had all the players split up into their roles literally weeks beforehand, and the game would not have run properly without it. So it's very important to do as much of the Discord work ahead of time as you can, because in the moment when things are stressful, Discord is a lot of clicks just to get anything done. Just giving someone permissions to see a channel, it's like 4 clicks, so it takes time. So as long as you're prepared and have some of that stuff set up ahead of time, you'll be able to have the bandwidth to handle anything that goes wrong, because stuff always goes wrong. The other thing I want to point out here is that your game really takes place in Discord. So you can have the fanciest looking map, the nicest looking pieces, but if the crap you're putting in Discord looks bad, then the whole game looks bad. The only player experience really is interacting with the parts of the game that you're sharing with them via Discord. So spend the extra time and put formatting on your reports and italicize things if you need to provide emphasis. Their experience is with Discord as much as it is with whatever module you've created, because I'll tell you right now, a good 50% probably 50 to 80% of players won't even open your module if you have a module. They'll look at the map, maybe they'll draw on the map in like Photoshop or something. But for the most part, their experience is whatever you give them. So make sure you think about what you're giving them in Discord. And that kind of leads into our eventual training exercise here, where we're going to talk about how to make good reports and good screenshots that give people enough information to play the game. Another vital piece that the players absolutely need is a terrain guide and map explanation of some sort. Now, some people, again, this is kind of umpire preference, but some people like to play with the direction of north. Some people like to play with the just information that's on the player maps. You could provide the players a different map than you are resolving the turns on. All those are really creative and interesting ideas, but I wouldn't recommend them for your first time out as a lead umpire, or really even assisting in a game like that can be difficult. Now, if you do want to do something like that, I still think that you should tell them which way north is, because otherwise it's going to be brutal. And I would just recommend north is up. Just keep it simple. North is always up. Even if your map is tilted in some way, still call up north. It'll just make things far easier for you and for the players. Another important thing is the sense of space, of how far can something move in a turn, because the most important thing about their interaction with your game rules, and this is the one part that you really do have to share with the players. I don't like people who try to keep this secret. You have to tell the players what's the maximum amount they can move in a turn, and how far could they expect to move given such and such a terrain. Would it cut their movement in half or something like that? It doesn't have to be that precise, but you have to tell them that walking across that stream is possible, but it's going to slow you to a crawl. It'll take you an hour to get across or something like that. And if they go into a situation where they're the famous example is, of course, Rock Creek, which is a small little stream on the Gettysburg battlefield, really tiny, but there was a historical Kriegsspiel game that was run on in the IKS, where it was treated as if it was the Atlantic Ocean. It was deemed as impassable. So you have to kind of know in advance and communicate to the other umpires in your game what kind of environmental barriers are really impassable and what is just going to slow people down. And then the players also should have that communicated to them in advance if possible. Where there are games where you can be the man on the spot and like simulate being in the saddle kind of thing, where maybe you wouldn't get all of that information, but you should still have a general idea of, okay, can my men cross over a stream, or should I be treating that as impassable? Like, are they carrying too much equipment that would bog them down? Or are they just infantry and they could just literally hop over it? So that stuff is absolutely vital to provide the players. And if you don't do that, you will suffer. And the players will suffer, more importantly. Another thing that kind of can be difficult, and this is the part I hate the most about umpiring, is order of battle research and then communicating that order of battle to players. The research portion is just very tedious. It's very detail oriented, and I personally hate it, but it is also very, very important. Having an accurate order of battle if you're doing a historical game is really important. And it's generally a good idea that the team knows its own units they at least are aware of their own units, and that they have a general idea of the force, of the size of the force they're fighting. So they don't need to know, or they probably shouldn't know, the exact composition of the enemy in most cases. Now there's exceptions to that, obviously, but in general, if you're just doing a regular Napoleonic battle, there's uncertainty in the exact order of battle of the enemy because you don't know what he brought to the field. Now, if the order of battle is flexible or there might be off-map reinforcements, the players should know that about their own force, that they should be expecting some reinforcements from such and such an angle, even if they never come. So those are kind of the most important things about orders of battle. And I also really recommend preparing a spreadsheet ahead of time. I'm going to click through this link here. And this is an example of what I like to do in my games. I will set up all of the channel names in one column, the umpire name in another, and the player name in the last column. Now you can do this in like Tabletop Simulator itself, or just on a piece of paper next to you. It doesn't have to be in a spreadsheet. I just prefer the spreadsheet because it's easy to copy and paste this somewhere if you need to, or copy a screenshot of it. I've tried a bunch of different ways, but that seems to be the easiest. The other nice thing about it is you could do something like this, where you set up the order of battle of the units as well, and then you can easily take this and just copy and paste it into their channel, and then they will know exactly what units they have. You can give them a count of how many battalions they have, and just say they're numbered 1 through 14. That's a really easy way to do an order of battle. If you don't want to find out the name of every unit, just find out how many battalions there are or how many brigades there are, and just copy and paste a number in there. And then you can rename them as you will. You don't feel that you're absolutely tied to a historical order of battle if it's going to make your life a living hell. Also, if you're going to include second in command players, I usually include those in the spreadsheet. And another thing about 2ICs is that generally you want to make sure that if there is a second in command, he's kind of limited in scope. Because I've tried some games where I let the 2ICs move around and basically treat him as a real player, and all it does is make it worse for you and the other players, because you're devoting resources to giving them reports, but they don't have the same impact on the game as others. So it's better to just treat them as part of a staff of another player. Now, this is probably the most advanced part of preparing a game, is preparing a good player guide. And like I said, if you use something like Ottovsky's system or James's systems, there's a lot of documentation already written up for you. But if you're doing a scenario from scratch, or you're writing a rule set from scratch, these are the items that you really, really need to include in a player guide. And if you choose to not have a player guide, I think for the most part you're going to regret it. If the players have no idea of the rules of combat, like how far away they can engage the enemy, how they can gain more intelligence, how fast they can move, and how long does it take for a dispatch to move from one place to another. If they don't have those basic facts, they cannot decide almost anything. They can't make decisions, and they don't have fun, and it just paralyzes them. So I would recommend trying to give them at least those basic facts. How combat works in terms of range, what they can see with scouts, with skirmishers, all those kind of rules that people will definitely ask about. And most importantly, how far can you move? How fast can you move? Another thing that I like to provide is the doctrine of the time. And this helps cut down on anachronisms a little bit. So, like, I run a lot of 7 Years War games, and most people are relatively familiar with the idea of linear warfare, but a few have gone into the detail that you would need to understand the ins and outs of it. So if you're thinking that someone from the 21st century could kind of wind back the clock without some sort of guide, you're dead wrong. People, even for Napoleonics and American Civil War games, absolutely need descriptions of common tactics and doctrines. Everyone knows about square and column and line formations, but it's more about what order they would march in. Telling players that they should have their artillery in the front, stuff like that. Now, some of that you will learn through practice, through playing the games, and that is part of Kriegsspiel, but there's no point in hiding that information from the players. You can just tell it to them. Whether they do it when they're in the heat of the moment is up to them, but there's no reason that they can't be told. The doctrine is to lead your line with your artillery, for example. And if they choose to do it differently because they think the column will move faster or something, and then they find out that their artillery never fired a shot in the entire battle, then they'll be sorry. And next time they'll learn their lesson and follow the doctrine properly. But I think providing a little bit of the doctrine and the background on why these tactics were in place can definitely help, I would say, the intermediate players the most. New players, it's probably going to go over their head a little bit unless they're kind of familiar with wargaming. And advanced players will probably ignore it thinking they know better. But intermediate players will definitely benefit from this kind of stuff. And that is the end of my prepared slides. So now with that, I'm going to open up the floor to any questions, and I'm going to stop my recording.